Preston Douglas Boyer. I curated this exhibition at Wienholt Projects, California Love. Thank y'all for coming tonight. This is our first artist talk of the evening featuring Skellington and Sarah Favreau, two artists in the exhibition, moderated by Daid Roy. So thank y'all so much for being here. Thank you so much for the artists, and I'm very excited to hear what y'all have to say. So take it away, y'all.
Hi, everybody. Really happy to be here with two amazing artists who just talk a little bit about their work. The conversation's kind of framed around like three questions. Kind of all dealing with their relationship to different parts of art and painting, and also maybe location. But yeah, let's get started. First question. Like each of you, if you could talk about as artists, your relationship to skill, technique, and labor. Who'd like to start? Flip a coin.
Sure. I think for me, skill and technique has always been something that I've acquired through labor. I think it's kind of the best way to sort of, pick up on things. I developed the way that I stretch my canvases by kind of observation, looking at like upholstery, thinking about the form. And the first few times that I tried, I had to do all these manipulations, and the canvas would rip, and there would be holes, and I'd have to start over, and it was things that took hours. And then as I kind of became more familiar with materials and tried out new canvases and linens and new techniques of pulling and moving my fingers a certain way, I developed a compatibility with this process that I feel is very intuitive to me and can happen very naturally. In terms of technique, I like a lot of techniques that's kind of inspired by the old masters. For me, my pieces are very kind of rooted in the history of painting. I kind of stick to the rectangular form at the stage. I'm not, getting too contemporary, exploring a lot of polygons. It's really important that it sits within the landscape of what's already been done. So, yeah.
Yeah, borrowing from the old masters, but also making it your own.
Yeah.
I see a real mastery on your part there too.
Matt.
Is the glazing technique? Is that how many would it use the old masters?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it for me is kind of like the blending. I kind of learned how to paint 3 times. First, I taught myself. Second, I learned from somebody who studied at an atelier for 5 years. And then third, I went to art school, which was a more deconstructivist approach to painting and kind of breaking down, what we teach ourselves about painting. So I think that's something that I revisited kind of as I began to re-explore my practice, learning how to blend really softly and finding brushes, natural hair. I kind of keep trying to push more and more towards tradition, using size and post gesso, kind of removing the plasticity of it, returning to earth in a certain way. Also I think I'm getting to the process of making a lot of my own paints, which is something that's new that I'm working with. So, grinding and milling and having that physical relationship with the material, I think is something that's also important to my practice at this time.
I would say, I had this great memory of learning photography from Daid, and I would say that I was the kind of artist that always struggled to encapsulate whatever vision I would have, and it would require some sort of intervention by learning the technique. And in terms of labor, these paintings and maybe everything I work on or make is considering the labor of the artist and how that answers something maybe existential, maybe spiritual, maybe intellectual, but we're so familiar with industrial and constantly homogeneous objects. So at least for me, when I see a painting that has the labor of the human hand, it activates something. I don't know how to describe that, but I know I can describe the feeling of seeing a painting, whether it's by Van Gogh or which I know that sounds not like that big of a deal, but for me, I was going to have me Christ, yeah. And I was learning programming. I was going to grad school. I wasn't going to classes, but I was going to learning programming. They were about to kick me out. They were like, "What is this guy?" Yeah, learning programming, and eventually getting really into physics simulations. So I would go to the National Gallery and see these paintings by Caravaggio, where you think the hand is like coming out of a painting, and you would think, okay, well, I'm not going to do something better than that. But I wonder what an artist like that, he was using the most avant-garde techniques and glasses and optics and measuring perspective devices. So I thought, okay, well, I'll try to, London, there's a bunch of technological stuff in the city, learning programming, how to build physics simulations so you can have these different spatial concerns, different refractions. I would say that's something.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the way that the reflections are rendered in the painting is just amazing. Both you guys, this is the first time I have moderated anything in my life, so I'm sorry. Doing my best. Millie and Sarah, I want to ask, this is another that I just thought of right now. What is your approach to, as really good painters, what is your approach to just color in general? Could you guys talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, color for me has always been a huge part of my practice. I learned at like a very young age that shadows are never black, they're like made of the opposite color of whatever is in space. So I kind of took that from a very young age and built that into my work. In high school, I was exploring complementary colors quite a bit. I lucked out in college. I had a teacher who, instead of teaching a half a semester of color theory, Albers taught a full year. So it is really what pushed me into painting, because I realized that there's far more things that I could learn about color through majoring in painting than I could learning sculpture or fibers or other kind of medium at the time. For me right now, my practice, my color is very intuitive. It's comes from like a very personal place. There's maybe some inspiration that I kind of am drawn to, whether it's like a piece of glass on a sidewalk against the concrete, or like a blush on a cheekbone in an editorial or something of that nature. But when I approach it, I'm really only like choosing like the color or so and reacting to what's happening on the surface. So it's very much a conversation between myself, what I'm feeling, and what's happening on the painting.
I could say colors in these works, especially, sometimes color will just be a means to an end. But in this series, I deal so much with Los Angeles and Hollywood as a mythology. The colors are really specific. So there's this history of painting. You might go to the Getty and see Van Gogh's irises, and there's these greens, and you're thinking of landscape, you're thinking of impressionism, and then you can also think of the green screen. So for something like this, there's a bunch of different greens and a bunch of different ways of applying those greens. And I was talking to a mentor maybe 10 years ago, and I was really kind of stuck in this certain palette, and he told me about Ellsworth Kelly would just go up to certain things and then think, I wonder what color that is, and then kind of take a swatch. So sometimes I'll see something and I'll try to make that in oil paint, which is a weird relationship because sometimes I'm watching a movie or playing a video game or looking at another artwork. You'll never recreate it, so it always becomes this idealized landscape green or green screen green. It's never going to be the same thing. And then something with that blue, with that sky, it's very specific on what is this sky blue, cloudless day look like? Yeah, specificity. Is something like this.
It feels almost photographic too. It's like an old print, like that type of, that has that quality, the sea print.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I don't know what's going on today, but I definitely probably watch The Wizard of Oz a lot with like my grandma, and there's these yellows and blues that John Baldessari talks about. And, you know, in kind of a bad way too, it's a very selective city, so, you know, it's like, for me, they're kind of like flowers. Like, oh yeah, come here. They're so beautiful. But it doesn't last, you know, forever.
Yeah, it's amazing, both you guys, like, to see everything like kind of filter to your own sensibility about color and about form. And Sarah, I'm thinking other stuff now, but like, you say you make your own pigments. Like, what level of control does that give you? That using like manufactured paints wouldn't.
Oh, I mean, right now it's still really early in the experimental period of that. But I think it allows me to give a little bit more complexity. Because I can look at like a purple and be like, I think that needs some green in it. Like, I think that would add a little bit more depth. Or I've been getting into this process of actually recycling the pigment from the bottom of like my turpentine jar. And trying to dry that out and grind it up and make paint from that and kind of recycle it back into the painting that it's from. So it's still something that I'm playing with and kind of better understanding the process of. But I like being active in the color, like having kind of more of a say in it.
Nice, active in the color. Let's shift gears maybe a little bit. I want to ask you guys about parts of your respective practices. Let's start with Sarah. I want to ask you, like, what is the role of like objecthood in your work, like the painting as an object? Even looking at this side profile, it's amazing. Stretches, so many engineering's happening that I can see. The painting's kind of acting as an object. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship in your work?
Yeah, I think when I was in school, it was something that I was much more engaged with on like a conscious level. I kind of started making these forms as a departure from figuration, as a way to kind of like explore more internal spaces, but at the same time, I was looking at like a lot of plasticity and like objects manufactured, shiny, colorful things. And then as I kind of re-entered this body of work with like a new perspective, I'm less kind of focused on the objecthood, more so than like the physicality of it, the way that it kind of interacts with the body in space. Like I think of a lot of my paintings, a lot of the silhouettes or places where there's curves or places where like an arm might reach or a neck could be or, you know, legs could stand. And so I started thinking about them more relationally in space more so than as like an object themselves. But I'm still kind of exploring ways in which like, you know, thinking about they are very sculptural and, you know, I do have like sculpture is kind of my first love. I started ceramics when I was really young and I've always been making things with my hands. I like building and touching, and so I feel like you know, I'm interested in exploring like, you know, paintings, like, the departure from painting and something that's a little bit more on the line between object and painting or sculpture and painting or something that's undefined.
Yeah, I was thinking like, where does your work makes you think about the question of where does sculpture start, where does painting end? And yeah, I love objects that works of art that kind of fall into those gray areas. And also, I think it's interesting you saying that it's kind of like how the work relates to the space around it, how you guys can see like the way that the light is getting cast, getting reflected by just the shape of the canvas. Yeah, it's really beautiful. And then Millie, I wanted to ask you, in your work, like what is your relationship to the painting as an image or as a way of disseminating imagery?
Yeah, painting as an image. Well, imagery is one of the driving forces behind why I make this stuff. You know, it's interesting because I think there's a relationship to imagery and text, and hours traveling, and I jotted down, it's not in this notebook, but one just like it. I made a little mountain and then made a little gesture that, you know, it said holy water instead of the Hollywood sign. And from there, it led to this journey where I ended up doing this deep analysis of the Hollywood sign and trying to use AI to make the word holy water, and it just kept looking really weird. So, and then it led to going back to some of those Hockney studies where you use photography, like analog photography. So there's a back and forth, but sometimes there's a dance between writing, which is, you know, thoughts, and imagery, and I'm pretty convinced that pop art and post-pop and digital pop is a way to cope with these ephemeral moments. So imagery is really important to me in that regard, and that this is a way to digest these things and not just make it exactly what it is. Like, it doesn't say exactly this or this doesn't. You might see something that looks familiar, but it's been transformed. So the transformation of the image is a key ingredient to this final thing, which I hope can, you know, invite conversation or excite someone without understanding it on that level.
Because I've seen your work for a long time. I'm a big fan. I think it's just amazing to me the way you use imagery and paint. It's like only, how can I say it? Like, you use imagery and you transform imagery and painting like in a way that only painting can. I don't know if that makes sense. But you're using painting to its best ability to do that. I remember like some of the portraits you've done, like the distorted portraits. It's just really, beautiful.
There seems to be in our time a focus on painting, and I plan to really, as much as I can in my lifetime, see how this cultural position without painting, why it's so important. I mean, you were talking about labor, and you know, I'm thinking of Sarah's work. Why do we gravitate towards these objects? And I don't think we have an answer. I think that's one of the beautiful things about art, is that artists intuitively make these things and deal with all of these conditions kind of at the same time.
Yeah. Wow. That's an amazing question. Wow. Yeah. I have one. Well, do you guys have any questions for each other?
I'm curious how when did you know, every artist is I mean, I think it's something like cooking or something. Like, how did you come to this very specific mode of making? Were it from, you know, were you making figurative work, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I was making figurative work for most of college. I started to depart into abstraction, kind of became really frustrated with the limits of like the rectangle. And like, to be honest, like, it was an assignment that pushed me to kind of think about like the structure as something that could be modified. I had seen Gorchow's work in Margot Chelsea my freshman year, filed it away, and we had the, teacher wanted us to make a shape painting, and I was thinking like the curves won't really resonate with me, because at the time I was making work that was like these slug-like abstractions of bodies, and so I wanted to find a way to kind of encapsulate that feeling in something physical.
Would you say that in some ways the word is an abstraction, or a close-up examination of pre-existing things or memories?
A lot of
In a
times,
sense.
yeah. I think especially with Willow, that comes from kind of another form that I had made that was really inspired by this really strong sensation of like wanting to give my friend a hug after a hard conversation, but not having the courage or like wherewithal to do so. And so I just stuck with this like heavy feeling of like, oh, should have done that. And then, you know, I made that piece, and I had a friend, you know, look at it, and he's like, you know, it kind of feels like a church hug, you know, there's not really much room to actually, like, get into it. And so, the form itself was, like, very much inspired by, like, wanting to get more space for, like, you know, arms to move, or, like, to stand closer, or to kind of give in. And I kind of, made the painting more so, like, the palette was a little bit more inspired by a memory of, like, placebos on my friend's bed after, like, a really nice day in the sun. And, you know, it kind of evolved into what it is now, but this is sort of kind of the moments, the periods of time.
That makes sense because there's so much back and forth between colors and shape, curvature, and hard edges. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it gives this other like emotional dimension too.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you have any questions for Max? As like two artists who they show their work next to each other.
Yeah, I'm curious. I've heard someone talk about the performance aspect of this piece. Could you tell me a little bit more about like that process?
Yeah. I think that at some point I just was really exhausted, maybe even as an artist, as a person. I was really looking for some alternate means to make art, and I don't remember how it started, but it started in New York, where I was known for making work in this kind of manner. And at some point, I just remember being in the clown suit, doing with this professional clown, and the painting became this backdrop. And then at some point, it became this platform for, you know, these performances, and there was, you know, a lot of different people, and then from there on, it just became this piece that would be this performance substructure for this larger mechanism. And what's interesting is that in that entire saga of work, I would say it got destroyed, you know, and I ended up rebuilding it for another show. So it was really satisfying to rebuild something and make it stronger than it was. So it's kind of stitched the way you would stitch, you know, a leather shoe or something by hand, you know, and then repainted. So it's interesting. It gave me hope that you can always breathe second lives into something, and nothing's ever a fully closed book. Whether you think the painting's done or the performance is done, it kind of really doesn't. So.
Do you see this piece as being something that you plan to re-engage within a performance space to kind of keep on that cycle? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the series. So this image it was created initially in around 2019 when I had learned how to do 3D modeling and, you know, being able to simulate light effects. So it's kind of ever evolving. I think I'm going to put a bookmark in this one, but it's been a great journey seeing, you know, something that you make on a computer screen, and then you have all these failed attempts, and you know then you redo the scale, so it's at a really specific scale that has the impact that you might see in a billboard, but it's still in a domestic space. But yeah, I'm sure the original piece from the series was called "The Afterlife of All Cinematic Images," and it was a nod to, you probably don't know this, but it's a nod to our teacher's teacher. So Larry Johnson is this great photo conceptual artist, and his teacher at Cal Arts was Douglas Hubler, and Douglas Hubler would go around and photograph people, and he created this project called to photograph every living person, or something in that regard. So immediately as a young overzealous artist said that, okay, well I'm going to do every movie thing. through all this ecosystem where you have the floor informing the wall. That's pretty
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, I try to, I have tried to put as much of a sustainable practice as possible, so I try to let everything inform everything else. But, yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know, I really like the idea of things having memory. I really like the idea of things, kind of, especially because, like, for me, a lot of my work comes from, like, you know, things of trauma and things that I'm processing when I'm making each piece. The ability to kind of, like, have, like, laughter in the same way that you said is really important to me to kind of show that it's possible.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I had one last question about this idea of like rebirth and journey of the work. And yeah, I want to ask you guys both kind of about your own journey as artists. Like, where do you see yourself kind of in the history and the lineage of California art or painting in general? I think it's amazing, like saying that you're just kind of investigating the role of painting, the role of art in society. But yeah, if you guys could maybe speak a little bit to that.
Well, just like yourself, we both grew up in LA, and there's definitely this moment that LA is having right now, but there's also this really deep history of contemporary art since the 60s. And grew up as you know, we went to school at Otis, called for art design. I think we were deeply traumatized by all these really conceptual artists. You know, so why? That's meaningless. Why would you do that? It's been done. So, yeah, I think the conceptual hanging around all of those people, you can probably, you know, relate to that. Who have these really, in LA at its best, you know, we could all talk about traffic and, you know, a bunch of other stuff, but LA at its best, there's amazing communities. So, you know, we're not really, or I don't know what the newest generation is thinking about, but being able to have these generations, it's almost like some sort of anime TV show where you have like the older artists and they're telling, you know, about, oh, I remember, you know, when Mike Kelly, we all went to his apartment and then, you know, this and this stuff. Yeah, there's this enormous influence of conceptual art that interestingly, you know, may have started in New York, but then it came to LA and had this second wind, and by the 80s, New York was really into neo-expressionism and Julian Schnabel, and here you still had John Baldessari, Henry Shea, a lot of people having this really deep, maybe intellectual side of these really funny and fun, poppy, interesting stuff. So,
For me, my relationship to California kind of stems. I mean, from San Diego technically. I moved there when I was 12. Spent a lot of my formative years in this landscape. But then spent 5 years in Baltimore and 7 years in New York. So I don't have as much of a close kinship or relationship with the artists in LA. I just moved here. But I don't know, I feel like I kind of, I try to kind of keep a distance from, not necessarily the art community, but the larger art picture, because I don't want to be too informed in my practice. I want to kind of keep it very personal to myself. But I'm very much inspired in my work, like, from the landscapes, from the memories of being here, from poppies, the vistas, the golden hour lighting. Like, I think making pieces about beaches at night, you know, I think like the memories of being in high school and going down and watching the coast and just like sitting in that film still of like a foggy, you know, evening, I think is really important to my practice. And so I feel a closer relationship to art in LA here just through my experiences and memories of growing up in San Diego.
I'm really envious of that because I think that makes why your work is so refreshing and so energetic. It's not, you know, bogged down by who did Renaissance word. I think he said something like, art should be the child of nature, not the grandchild. So I really like that your work is straight from the source of these experiences and there's not a lot in between.
I try to be, because I mean honestly I had this moment in college, I think it was like my freshman or sophomore year, where I would go to New York like every single weekend and I would go see every single show and go to every museum, and I like overloaded myself with art to the point where I couldn't make anything anymore, because I was like, oh, that's too much like cocooning, that's too much like Stella, that's too much like, and I became so consumed with like what I couldn't do that it started to kind of limit like what I was actually, and I almost dropped out. So I think having, you know, I try not to engage too much with artists that I feel like have to a similar practice, which is ironically why like I don't even have like a close relationship with the old masters beyond process, but like I'm really interested in, I think like the work of the 60s. I really love Preston Douglas Boyer's work is like something that really speaks to me on like a transformative level. But yeah, I try to keep it a little insular, you know.
Well, it's interesting because Felix Gonzalez Torres has so much to do with longing, and when you talk about a hug, now I'm projecting this really inviting gesture of your works. Have you ever thought of it? Are they kind of inanimate objects, or do they have this inviting morphology?
I mean, I think that's up to, you know, whoever's experiencing them, but I think I do kind of see like the form as like a body and the color of it as like a sphere onto the body, and so I try not to keep them separate at this moment, because I'm just making bodies without life. You know, I think each one has its own personality and like voice, and you know, there's not much of an intentional through line other than just like exploring and experimenting and allowing them to kind of reveal themselves to me.
What's next? Well, your question.
Millie, can you kind of touch on the Sotheby's performance from this painting in particular?
Yeah. So I have a dear friend who was at the Sotheby's Institute of Art, and they said, "Hey, we love this painting. We'd love to show it." And I was looking at it, and it was, destroyed. And I thought, okay, well, yes, but give me like a couple weeks. So I sewed it and repainted all of the destroyed parts. And again, another kind of non-logical thought was I took it from Lower Manhattan around Tribeca and walked it up Fifth Avenue. And that was the to get it in there. And it was a great experience doing all that. I'm just glad I didn't like get sued. Walk into a moving man in New York, get beat up, and things. So, but yeah, it was really cool. Also, just seeing how artwork engages on the street, because you meet all these people, you have all these conversations from people all over the world, essentially. And we stopped in front of the MoMA, kind of took some photos and stuff in front of that, which was cool before they booted us. But yeah, it was just another way to see not only how does this work interpret space, but how does artwork traverse space, because artworks inhabit architecture. So what did this look like orphaned out in the wild? Because art gets shipped all the time and moved all the time. I also thought it would be kind of just a fun thing. My shoulder was exhausted. I wasn't built for that.
I wanted to ask you guys, and wrapping up, like what's next for each of you. But before that, is there any other questions in the audience? Okay, yeah, what's next, guys?
Well, I'm just finishing up an installation that's closing this Sunday, and then I'm working on a body of work that's a lot more personal to me. I think kind of continuing like the feeling of wanting to hug, thinking about different modalities of love and absence and presence, and kind of the intersection of my body, objects in space and, art stuff. And I'm also exploring other mediums as well. Been really into ceramics again. Been getting into jewelry making, for myself as a personal exploration and trying photography. Again, as something that just to kind of have my hand in everything to kind of really understand what are the things that drive me, where does sentimentality lie in my process, and so I think still to be discovered, but expansion for sure.
I'm working on really the same things. I'm working on some stuff that Preston was actually interested in. It was a body work that started when I was studying in London, and it's a reinterpretation of A Tale of Two Cities. So there's paintings but it's reimagined as LA and London. So you have American icons and paintings of Princess Diana and about the Kennedys and Randy's Donuts and stuff like that. So we'll stay tuned on
Yes. Sarah, Millie, thank you guys so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.